So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes and their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Andy Elliott, who's sports media and communication specialist at Sport Acuity. So firstly, Andy, thanks for coming on board and coming back on board again. If you'd like to introduce yourself and Sport Acuity, what you do, how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Sure. I mean, we're a York-based business. We've grown slightly since the last time I spoke to you. We're now about 14, 15 people.
Wonderful.
Originally, my background is journalism, worked for national newspapers, the National News Agency, the Press Association. When I left PA in the late 2000s, myself and my former colleague, we formed a company called the Content Factory, which, as it sounds, was a business designed to supply content.
Yep.
Being two ex-journalists, it made sense. But we also did our own thing. We also forged our own path doing consultancy as well for various organizations. And then about 5 years ago, we linked up with a couple of guys who had more experience in the digital space than we did, which is strange. I mean, Chris, my business partner, and I, we were at the start of the internet in the late 90s, but we don't consider ourselves digital natives by any stretch. And so we linked up with two other guys who had a bit more experience in that, and we formed Sport Acuity. And broadly based, we are a content provider. And when I say content, it's largely the written word, but some video, social, audio, but largely the written word, and tailored to a specific audience, to a specific client. And our clients tend to be fairly big, and not many of them are based in the UK, funnily enough. Right. So we work for UEFA, we work for the European Club Association, we work for European Professional Club Rugby. We also supply betting companies with content. Basically, if somebody wants content, we'll supply it. And that's what we've done in the last 5 years. The digital aspect has come in terms of more consultancy and in terms of helping clients grow their audience, grow their business. And one of my colleagues, particularly Graham Shaw, Graham comes from a background of that. He used to be editor-in-chief of sportinglife.com,
right,
skysports.com, and was global manager for goal.com, which is a massive football website. So Graham brought that expertise, and we've done a lot of consultancy around that as well, done a lot of consultancy around the betting industry and around content, building communications. And that's Sport Acuity. But during the pandemic, we lost 4 key clients in about the space of a week, simply because events weren't happening, they needed to cut back, and literally they were just wiped off the bottom line. And we did actually wonder whether it was worth continuing, like a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
But for various reasons, we stuck it out. And towards the end of 2020, I think, isn't it? Things began to pick up. But being a service provider, as I'm sure lots of other service providers will tell you, you're always at the mercy of your clients.
Yeah.
As we found out to our cost, really. So we thought that perhaps we should have an element of our business which was either producing something or publishing something, but something that we owned and so we could control more.
Yeah.
And we looked at various sports because, we work just in sport. We don't work in anything else but sport. We looked at various sports. We ruled out football straight away because it's such a crowded market.
Yes. Makes sense.
We looked at Formula One because we've done a lot of work with Formula One in the past. We looked at boxing, we looked at tennis, but we were actually doing some work in triathlon, which is a fairly niche sport, but a fairly big sport in terms of the the kind of regional spread and the kind of people who take part. And we had an opportunity to acquire a website called try247.com, which we ummed and ahed about because, I say, we didn't have publishing expertise as such.
Yeah.
But we thought that by providing our editorial expertise, our business knowledge, and our kind of experience in terms of growing audiences, that we could actually do something good with it. That came with a website alongside it called Run 247.
Right.
And that was basically really had just been launched. It didn't really have any audience. So we took them on. We took on a couple of members of staff. We started to put some resource into it, and we instantly saw the result from just providing better content. And that was probably the middle of, where are we, 2021.
Right.
And over the next 6 months, just by adding better editorial to the triathlon site, we managed to build the audience. And then at the start of last year, we brought in a proper MD, somebody who'd worked with us as a consultant, a guy called Dan Gray. And we said to Dan, look, you focus on this completely. We'll provide the support. It will become a kind of division within Sport Acuity. And we'll give you as much resource as we can and see where we go. And it's interesting because since then it's been a tale of success and a tale of challenges. Neither of which is a particular surprise, because we thought there was an audience there.
Yep.
Triathlon is it's quite a well-to-do sport.
Yep.
You need to. It's not something you can just go out and do. You need to own a bike. You need to be able to swim. You need to be able to run.
Yep.
But it's quite a strong sport, and it's got a really strong community. And we've done very well in terms of growing the audience. So measuring the audience in various ways, if you look at the average per month unique users, it was around about 50,000 when we took it over.
Yeah.
And it's now averaging about 300,000.
Wow.
And we are regularly, Try247 is regularly the #2 site in the world in terms of triathlete audience. And when I say audience, it's not just UK. We get as many from North America as we do from the UK.
Right.
We have a strong following in New Zealand, Australia, and parts of Europe as well. So in terms of growing the audience, it's been really, really good. We've learned a lot about content, as content should be used digitally.
Yes.
To traditional journalists, digital content can sometimes be a dirty word, because we've all seen websites that are just loaded in terms of search engine optimization, with adverts flying in from all over the place, content overwritten, packed with keywords. We've learnt that you can do it journalistically, but also build an audience. And we've learned a lot about how best to grow an audience. And it's quite interesting because, being a traditional journalist, when Chris and I were young journalists on regional newspapers, you had an idea what stories would sell the newspaper. So, I was on the Hull Daily Mail, my first job. If Hull City won, we knew that night's newspaper would sell well. But we didn't always know that some stories would necessarily attract an audience. And it was largely through gut instinct, knowing the area, knowing the field. But coming forward to modern times, you can tell exactly what a story does.
Yeah.
So we could publish a story on the triathlon website in the early days thinking, what a cracking story this is. This is a great story. And the audience would be tiny.
Yeah.
We could publish something else and the audience would be huge. So you learn about what people look for. And in simple terms, it's It's the kind of questions that people type into Google. So as well as the news, which, there's been some big news in triathlon this week with doping, which attracted a big audience. It's also things like, what is a triathlon? How do I train for a triathlon? What are the best shoes? That kind of thing. So we learned a lot on the content side. Where the challenges have come is in making money,
Right.
which won't surprise anybody. Because most people who have internet sites, advertising is something you look for, and we've looked for advertising and we've done pretty well on that. But you can't run a business, an internet business, just on advertising. There has to be other ways of making money.
Yes.
So we've developed relationships with brands. We're trying to develop e-commerce, look at merchandising, look at ways of gathering third-party data. So the challenges have come in terms of generating the revenue. Signs are good, but we're not there yet. So the next step really is to look at, do we go for extra funding? Do we look at, trying to grow it in some other way? Do we look at more investment? And we have invested. We've brought in more staff. It's got more editorial staff, more commercial staff. But, to go to the next stage, to become the number one site in the world, what do we do? So that's where we are at the moment. And with the run site, and when I say running, our vision is for a kind of suite of endurance sports sites. And triathlon is an obvious endurance sport. The running that we do, it's not park run, it's not road running, it's largely ultra running. So trail running, people doing 50 odd miles across Snowdonia, as they will do this weekend. There is a really big audience for that, even bigger than triathlon. And although triathlon has big stars, maybe not household names, but obviously people like the Brownlees are household names, and some of the Norwegians coming through are getting big headlines now. The running side of things, ultra running as they call it, doesn't really have any big names that we would know about, but it's got big names in its own field.
Yes.
And there are a lot more of them. And we see running as having more, perhaps even more potential than triathlon. And interestingly, we started from a base of hardly anything in terms of audience. And we're now regularly doing, 25, 50,000. One month we did 70,000.
Wow.
It's going up all the time. And, wherever we go with the business, I think perhaps we'll look at other endurance sports as well to tag on to that. So maybe cycling, but not road cycling, but, off-road cycling. Swimming, maybe open water swimming is a possibility. So these are things we're looking at. So it's a really interesting point in our kind of development, if you like, from going from a B2C business to a B2C business going from a B2B business to a business with a B2C aspect as well.
Fascinating, isn't it? Because and obviously the scale of that is so much more significant in terms of potential clients, potential sales, etc. Obviously you've really got into quite detail on the development of everything. What would you say the key learnings you've had from both the challenges and the successes? It's funny, and I may have mentioned this when I last spoke. We do a lot of work with Frank Dick, who's a very well-known athletics coach, going back over many years, and one thing he talked about a little while ago was absolutely we need to learn from our challenges, and that's what most people do. They analyze the whole idea of black box thinking. But one thing he said that's always stuck with me since he said it was that if we don't analyze, if we don't know why we've won, then it was luck.
Yes. Yeah,
And
that's
so,
true. Yeah,
yeah, so I'm interested. So from
yeah.
the history you've
That's
had,
a really good point, because in the early days of when we took the triathlon site on, we had some big wins in terms of audience, but we weren't actually sure why.
yeah,
Now we know why, and
brilliant.
we're much more scientific in terms of measuring spikes in audience figures, knowing what works, what doesn't work. Graham, my colleague, he tends to oversee a lot of the editorial side of things, and he's got a really good sense of what works digitally, what works online, and that knowledge is vital to the guys working on that on those sites. Because as I say, traditional journalists like me, we learn, but we're not digital natives. We're not
Yeah,
instinctive in terms of how to build that audience.
yeah.
But with science and data, you can actually see what works and what doesn't work. So that's been really vital.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the digital world gives us that instant feedback. You
Yeah,
know, I would guess, and I don't obviously, but in traditional, paper journalism, you can see your readership go up over time, but it's very much delayed by the publication and then recording stats, etc. And
that's
sales.
right. Yeah, old-fashioned circulation managers, they would claim to know what sold in a particular area, but sometimes it was a bit hit and miss.
Yeah,
So it's interesting because the really successful newspapers in the 70s and 80s, they really knew their audiences and
yeah,
they really went for it. So you're thinking of the Sun when the Sun was well over 4 million.
yeah,
Going back 60, 70 years, the Daily Express when it was selling 5 million, they really knew their audience.
yeah,
But their audience wasn't being competed for by lots of other things.
yeah.
And the big difference nowadays is that everybody's competing for your audience.
Yeah.
So yeah, triathlon, it's a small community, but there are still enough people in there fighting to get that audience. And it's not an infinite pool of people who you're going to attract. So you've just got to get it right, and that's the challenge.
Brilliant, brilliant. Sounds fascinating. And you said your team had grown. So what sort of growth in your own internal
Well,
team?
in terms of the kind of publishing side, if you like, the triathlon and the endurance sport, the running, we've grown that in terms of we brought in an MD, we brought in a commercial director, we're looking for another salesperson. We brought in an editorial director, and editorial team to work around him. So I wouldn't say we built it from scratch, but we've added to it and changed it and developed it. And then on the other side of the business, Sport Acuity side, we have been able to grow that. So we haven't just kind of settled for focusing on the publishing side. We have grown the content side of the business and the consultancy side of the business. And we brought people in there as well. Sometimes freelance, but sometimes the freelancers are still working for us on a semi-permanent basis. So, and it's a different way of working, but it works for them and it works for us.
Brilliant, brilliant. And you probably remember last time, I love picking up quotes or sayings that people use a lot. Is there anything that you picked up recently that you'd like to share that you use a lot?
Well, look, I've been around the block a few times, and I'm not I'm not in the first flush of youth, but I tell you what, you can still learn. And going back to what I said about the internet, I remember being at the Press Association in the mid 90s, and PA was one of the pioneers of the internet in the UK. Launched a website called Ananova, which was eventually sold to Orange. And because we were a content provider, we were providing content to internet sites across the world. Helped us grow the business enormously. So you'd think I knew about the internet, but the last 2 years have taught me I didn't.
Brilliant.
And I've learned a hell of a lot. about the digital landscape and about publishing digitally.
Brilliant.
So so you're never too old to learn, is what I'd say.
Brilliant, love it. Absolutely. And so looking forward, Andy, what does the future look like for you guys, and what challenges or if any do you foresee?
Well, I think you can't stand still, and with the endurance sport business, we have to grow it. We've done very well to get to the point we're in.
Yes.
But if we stopped now, we just have to stop full stop. That would be it. We've got to carry on going, or just stop. And we're not going to stop, so we've got to carry on going.
Right.
And the other side of the business, well, it's always prone to, clients changing their mind or moving on, but that just comes down to hard work and keeping relationships going. I think all of our clients have come through network, and that's been the key to it. It's just talking to people.
Yeah.
People are now getting out and about and seeing each other again, and we found that really, really, really good, really beneficial.
Right. Yes.
To actually go to networking events, go and see people, sit down for a coffee. You pick up so much. May not be direct business, but you'll pick up so much, which ultimately they lead to business.
We're social animals. It's and people buy for people. So, and I agree. You never know what's going to happen. I never miss an opportunity to go to an event or just meet somebody for a coffee.
No, exactly.
You just know where it goes on the day. The key thing is having our ears and eyes open for the opportunities that will exist in that meeting.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Are there any sort of new initiatives we should be looking out for from you guys that you can share with us? Maybe not, but
well, it depends. Funnily enough, we have a board meeting this afternoon about the endurance sport business, and then we have another meeting in 2 weeks' time, and they're both looking at, one side will be looking at where we take the content, and the other meeting will be look at where we take the business in terms of how we grow it.
Yeah.
Do we go out to the market and say, help us, or do we try and bring somebody in to help us, or what? So yeah, they're the big questions for us at the moment.
Brilliant. It's clearly exciting times, which is great to see, and the reason we do this is to highlight the great businesses we have around our doorstep, and it's great to see another success story that you're going from success to success. Now, before I go, I must ask you this. I'm going to put you on the spot, and forgive me, but with the conversation you and your colleagues might have been having recently, are Leeds staying up or going down?
Well, they've just sacked their manager.
I know. I've got big Sam.
I mean, this season has been the most bonkers season I can remember. I just, having seen Leeds play a few times recently and looking at their next 2 games, it will take a lot to keep them up. Yeah. But the season has been so crazy. I think we said before, I'm a Sheffield Wednesday fan.
Yes.
And we went 6 games without winning, and that just blew our promotion hopes. Yeah. And we're going to end up with 90 odd points and not go up. So, well, unless we win the playoffs, but
let's hope so.
So yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
I don't have anything against Leeds. I'd love to see them stay up. A lot of my friends are Leeds fans, so yeah.
Forgive me for putting you on the spot, but
no, it's fine.
Be remiss of me not to try and get some insight info.
No. I used to report on Yorkshire football many years ago, so I don't have anything against any club, even Sheffield United.
Oh, steady on. Brilliant. Well, Andy, thanks so much again for spending some time. It's been again fascinating, and it's great. I'm loving re-interviewing people about what we've done since, and it's great to see that we're seeing growth in another great Yorkshire-based company. And for anyone that would like to get watching this, would like to get in touch with you or the company, what would be the best way to do so, Andy?
Just drop me an email. It's andrew.elliott@sportacuity.com.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, and hopefully maybe we could touch base again another 12
Absolutely.
months and see what the next steps are.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.